Good evening. Happy New Year, or at least New Year's Eve for the next few hours. The Ranter is back to go into yet another rambling diatribe of the news of the day. Now, I was meaning to do this for the past few weeks, and illness and other real life issues, work just gets in the way of it. But, to try to follow up on the No Kings video I did last time around, and to try to go into some manner of consistency in terms of what my usual topic is, which is concerning Donald Trump. However, so much has gone by. Like always, if you step away for like a week, then 3 to 5 stories will go by, and you lose the track of anything to keep anything consistent. So what is there to talk about? What is there to rant about? Well, unfortunately, pretty much every one of the items that he is involved with, either himself or through policy, is worthy of ranting. But there's so much material that to do it in all one video may as well be my version of the extended edition of The Lords of the Ring, any one of the movies, or The Hobbits. So what do I do? What do I focus on? Focus on his, in the previous months of his attempting to get National Guard into any of the cities that he don't like to help his ICE goons do more and more depraved grabbing of people, not even humanely, just dragging them across the street, beating the shit out of them in the process. Should we talk about his reaction to the ever-increasing amount of material that's coming out of the Epstein files, including the vote that the Republican-controlled Congress was compelled to have upon the Epstein files, to which Mike Johnson, before the vote was made, came out with a nice little press conference, says, "Oh, I'm going to vote for it, but I think it's a performance vote, and I don't think it really matters, and really it's just nothing, it's just melodramatic, but I'm going to vote for it," because he had to vote for it because he knew that there was enough people, thanks to the lady from Arizona that was able to finally got sworn in by him, who he delayed it, I think specifically to prevent her from being the 218th vote to allow the Epstein files to be voted on to be released. Be that as it may, he's, I'm still going to vote for it. Yeah. And then when it passed the House, he was expecting the Senate Republicans to, ride into the proverbial rescue so that they could erase things and redact things and change things around, amend it. But then he threw a temper tantrum because of the bill that he voted to passed unanimously in the Senate. And he threw a little temper tantrum with that, as Trump threw a temper tantrum with that. Should we talk about our war crimes of us just striking Venezuelan boats in Venezuelan waters for no apparent reason other than, they're full of drugs? Really? Should we see any evidence? Oh, it's all blown up now. Okay, so what's your evidence? Well, I don't have to show you evidence. I'm just going to blow them up. And then, threaten a land war in Venezuela, us striking Nigeria on Christmas Day. I mean, just, the day of the Prince of Peace, obviously. Christmas Eve, excuse me. So maybe when the 3 wise men was following the star to find baby Jesus, it wasn't really a star at all, but it was a retrograde, time-warped visual of our airstrikes into Nigeria. But I digress. It could be a myriad of things that we could be talking about. So this might as well be one of those not really structured rants. But, which means I'll bounce back and forth between topics. But what I will not really get into, or not have a conversation, or not really have a rant about, is his disgusting response to the death of Rob Reiner and his wife. I don't really want to go into that. I'll make a little bit of mention. It'll be the most minimum compared to everything else I'm going to talk about, but I don't want to talk about that. With the caveat of one point. If people are shocked, disappointed, that Donald Trump would react that way to the murder of Rob Reiner, in terms of making it about himself, saying that Rob Reiner and his wife died because he angered people so much because of his Trump derangement syndrome. If you are shocked and surprised about that, then you haven't been paying attention. It is yet another example of what I've suspected for a while, and I made mention it in various videos that I've done. Donald Trump is a 79-year-old child. He's a child. How he responded is a response of a child. Now, people might go, well, he can't be a child. He's 79 years old. He's an adult. He's an elderly adult. He's an elder adult. In age, yeah. In body, yeah. But in mind, in emotional stability, no, he's not. Pretty much any major statement or any major action he has done as president, or anything he's done in his adult life, seems to come from the core stunted emotional erraticism, which is not even a word, erratic behavior of a child. Or at the very least, well, we'll say a teenager. This guy didn't like me, so I'm just gonna like, he died. He died because of me, because of Trump derangement syndrome. He pissed people off too much. It's all about me. Anything that happens in this world is about him, one way or the other. You can't normalize this. Or you can't sit there and try to normalize this. There are people who defended him on this by saying they did not know who Rob Reiner was. All they know that he has Trump derangement syndrome. They don't know what he is because they never saw movies. Movies that define generations. No, I don't know. He shouldn't have said anything at all. Yeah, you're right. He shouldn't have said anything at all. But he did. He is a child. His reactions are without nuance, without pragmatism, without any thinking, contemplation that comes from adulthood, comes of the concepts of responsibility, the concepts of consequences. He's a child. And again, one asks, how could that be since he's 79 years old? I believe, and this has been a theory that I've said, like I said in earlier videos, being an adult does not mean age. I think, from my opinion, from theory, being an adult is about growing up with the experience of consequences, of responsibility. If you have no responsibility, if you have the access to everything you ever wanted, and whatever you want to strive for is easy to obtain, or it at least doesn't take all that hard work to obtain because you have money, or you have power, or your family has power, or your family has money. You do not learn the experience of being told no. You do not feel the consequences of your actions, to feel the responsibility of your actions or your words as it affects other people, because it doesn't affect you. Like anything in life, you grow through trial and error. The evolution of our age, from a child to a teenager to young adult to adult, etc., comes with the trial and errors. If you don't have experience with it, you don't evolve above. You don't go higher. You don't grow up in terms of your mental and emotional capabilities. I'm 47 years old. In many ways, I'm also kind of stunted, which makes me feel like, despite the fact that I should be at my physical age to be more of an adult than I am still, in essence, a Toys R Us kid, except for the fact that I know I'm old enough to get that reference. But I am more of an adult than Donald Trump, because I've suffered the consequences of my actions. I've suffered the consequences of my words. I feel the responsibility of my actions and my words even when they hurt others. There has been times that I've lied, and those lies had hurt people that I care about. And despite the motivations of why I lied one way or the other, it still hurt them. Trump lies like it doesn't matter what he says. He was taught by Roy Cohn, a very infamous person for those who don't know who Roy Cohn is. And if you don't want to actually go into the great details of, researching him, factual basis of, research of his history, of his past, go watch the HBO movie Citizen Cohn. James Woods plays him brilliantly. But you can get a gist, a working knowledge of who Roy Cohn was. But the one thing Roy Cohn taught Trump was that never accept responsibility. Never admit to a falsehood. Never take blame. Always deflect. Always deny. You're digging a hole, but at least it's sugar-coated when you're digging that hole. Never complain, never explain. Well, he complains, all right. See, there's a difference. You learn from your failures better than your successes. Experience is garnered from your failures, so that when those opportunities come up again and you have the experience of your earlier failure, you don't do it again. You try another route, and perhaps that succeeds, and then you move forward. So pretty much the basis of this section on the Rob Reiner murder and what Trump said about that. It's just a blanket statement that Trump is not an adult. And if you thought he was an adult, up to now, despite everything he said or done up to now, then you haven't been paying attention. Or you're lying to yourself, or you're lying to us because you do know. But because our politics is so partisan that we have to protect our tribe, that you can't admit it even to yourself, because in some twisted, weird way, whatever falsehoods that you are president, and in terms of your president being the person of your party that's representing you, from your point of view, whatever falsehoods, lies, bullshit, or evil deeds that he does somehow reflects upon you because you voted him in. We'll get into more of that idea in a moment, but at least for this particular moment in time, let's just say that no, you're not responsible for whatever Donald Trump does, even if you vote for him. Because unless you saw ahead of time of what he was going to do, and you fully voted for that, despite how much it would hurt people, perhaps people on your own side, if you want to keep it to the partisan tribal system here, you're not responsible. You know, as much as I am someone who is a critic of Trump, and someone who people will claim suffers from Trump derangement syndrome, I don't go out there and actively blame people who vote for Donald Trump. There are people who vote for Donald Trump not because there's some, MAGA cultist that believes every word he's saying, and not because they are just so partisan, tribal in voting for an R regardless. There are some people who vote for Donald Trump who wanted to still keep their own values and thought he was the person close enough to those values. Who wanted to see smaller government, who wanted to have immigration protections, or immigration control, rather, to secure the border, who wanted this and that, and thought he was going to be better doing that as opposed to Kamala Harris. And people pragmatically, do the trade-offs. Is that, he's a social asshole, that he's a pathetic human being, but as long as he does what I need him to do, then, that's fine. I mean, how many Democrats probably at the time said that's the same thing about Bill Clinton? And, we'll forgive an intern here and there. We'll forgive the Paula Joneses if you can, if you can help us with this or that. It's a political trade-off. That's happened forever. But not to this extent. And I don't think even 20 years ago, if we had the same political environment 20 years ago than we have now, there would be more Republicans in line of impeaching Donald Trump than there are now. Because back then, even though it was getting bad, it was still about the country instead of it being about one person. So that's all about that. That's as far as we're going to go with the Rob Reiner adjacent issue. But it is interesting what it takes for people to open their eyes, to take off the blinders. What does it take? Marjorie Taylor Greene is now persona non grata to the MAGA base and Donald Trump. Because she wants to see the release of the Epstein files. And she wants people who are on that list to be investigated and face consequences. Well, Donald Trump doesn't want that. And it is now this has now ended that quasi-relationship of Donald Trump and his MAGA daughter, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was one of his avid supporters, defenders in Congress, in, social medias. She would attack on behalf of him. But for whatever reason, that she doesn't want to bury the Epstein files, that she wants to have answers, she's now the enemy. She's now Marjorie Traitor Greene in terms of Donald Trump. Traitor. That word flies around lately when it comes to Donald Trump. Democratic senators came up with a video in relation to the Venezuelan boat bombings, that reminding the military that they do not need to follow unlawful orders. In fact, it is their oath and required not to follow unlawful orders. Donald Trump and his minions like Scott Jennings on CNN, describe that as tantamount to them committing treason, and in his words, treason is punishable by death. So these senators, like Mark Kelly, should be charged with and convicted of treason for reminding military personnel that they are required, they're obligated not to follow unlawful orders. And the Trump administration, with Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War now, Secretary of War as opposed to Secretary of Defense, is looking for ways to punish these people, as they're trying to find ways of punishing Mark Kelly militarily because of his military background, that they wanted to activate him back into the military in order for them to court-martial him. All for reminding the military of their own obligations. Now, again, in this kind of childlike, non-nuanced persona of Trump and Hegseth, is that the president, the commander-in-chief, is above such things as rules of engagement. That there is no unlawful order when it comes from an order from the President of the United States. So you can go ahead and commit war crimes under his order. Now, why is that childlike? It is childlike because people who are actual professional military officers, high-level brass, understand that you shouldn't be taking any military action lightly. That you can't just wake up one morning, eat your Wheaties, and go, let's send a sortie of planes and drones and bomb the shit out of a boat just because. Or bomb a village in Nigeria just because. That you have to have reasons, and you have to say what those reasons are. You have to be prepared to address the nation as to why these things are happening. Give the reasons, give the evidence. Not manufacture the evidence. Not make it up just to excuse your actions of doing it. As we're seeing with the Venezuelan boat bombings. As we're seeing with the bombing that they did of the one boat that they did twice. Twice! The boat was sinking. The boat was smoking. The boat was on fire. People were killed except for two guys. Two folk on that boat. That was the moral justification for them to turn back around to hit it a second time. That's a war crime. They were completely no longer a threat, if they were ever a threat at all. But they had to die. They had to die. Which is pretty funny. Not really funny, but pretty funny. Because one of the many attacks we did on Venezuelan boats, there was 2 survivors. And they were captured. And guess what? These people who are essentially these narco-terrorists, these there's no fentanyl coming from Venezuela, but these drug-pushing people on boats that would have to cross the Caribbean Sea, go around Haiti, and just take 1,500 miles to get to Florida, okay? The dangerous folk in this boat, yeah. These 2 people that, unlike the other 2 people that had to die because they were clinging to a boat, these 2 people that they did capture, they repatriated them back to Venezuela with no charges. I guess they were innocent of something when their ship was fucking blown up. But we're blowing up these boats. Trump announces that we're blockading Venezuela. We're seizing their oil tankers. We're now claiming that their oil on their land is ours and we want it back. What? Oh yeah, and remember, as I mentioned this about twice, of us bombing Nigeria, on Christmas Eve, when the 3 wise men was following the star for the baby Jesus. From the guy that, should have won a Nobel Peace Prize, bombed Nigeria to avenge the deaths of Christians in a Christian genocide. Only one problem from the Nigerians' point of view is that the village that they bombed in the northern section of Nigeria, the only people that was there were in the population that was harmed by anybody in Nigeria, like Boko Haram. That area is not populated by Christians. It's populated by Muslims. So you're bombing Nigeria for no apparent reason. Other than perhaps Nigeria is one of those shithole countries that he likes to complain about. Like Somalis, likes to Somalia. How they're now trash. You get a number of people who are in a fraud scheme and they're Somalis. So all Somalis, even if they're like American citizens, are all trash now. We have to get rid of them all. When it turns out that the fraud bullshit in Minnesota was started by a white woman. But that's the boogeyman because, I guess because of Ilhan Omar, was that it? Because she needs to get stripped of being in Congress, as he says. She needs to get stripped, kicked out. Child. He's a child. His administration, his children. The permissive nature of him is appealing to others who not only want to be like him because he is a millionaire and he does all these things in excess. He is the living embodiment of the go-go 80s. That should never have been president, Because if he was never president, at least we would have had him being that representation of the excesses of the go-go 80s, and that'd be like, oh, that was a cute time. He was part of that. No. No, no. No. But, if he can get away with it, why can't I get away with it? And he speaks our language. You get people who defend him, who will take up the banner of pure racism in terms of the fraud case, only speaking about those who are Somali. And talk about this investigation of this fraud being a revelation of now because of a YouTuber. When this investigation concerning this particular fraud was being done for the last few years under the Biden administration, people were arrested and charged and convicted of this fraud Ponzi scheme under the Biden administration. But let's pretend it was just happening now and only during the Trump administration that it was found out. But don't let fucking truth and facts get in the way of fantasy Candyland. But again, all this noise could be a wag of the dog for us to not pay attention to something else that is going down. Something that are in files, being rapidly released, piecemeal here and there, which is not as redacted as people thought they were. Because you never know. You never know if any of this stuff is, seriously policy-driven stuff that Trump himself is specifically wanting done that he would want to do anyway. Or the fact that he wants to keep the front page free of anything involving Jeffrey Epstein. And as Marjorie Taylor Greene said in one of her last conversations with Trump was screaming at her, saying that they released the Epstein files, it could hurt his friends. I'm going to make this point, and I've been wanting to make this point for a while, and I just never, since I haven't been doing these videos lately, that I wasn't able to make this point. But you ever notice that this Trump administration, not only Trump, but those people around his administration, would rather talk to Ghislaine Maxwell and lament upon what could happen to the victims of Epstein, that they consider to be victims are the people that are in the Epstein files and not the actual fucking victims themselves? Hey, whoever's in the Epstein files are not the victims. Whoever is caught in this supposed honeypot, who just has their names on these files, who may have done something or may not have done something, they're not the victims. It's the women who were young girls at the time that were molested, abused, raped, trafficked to be raped, taken to be raped by Epstein, by Epstein's friends, and by Ghislaine Maxwell, the lady who not only was grooming these young girls, who participated in the rapes. One victim had said she was involved with it. She took off her clothes. She was a participant in the actual activity. But because the government needs to have a conversation with her, they allow her to serve out her sentence by transferring her to a less secure facility so she can get pampered. And she's crowing, wanting to be released from her prison sentence that she believes, and she gets a hint that she might get pardoned by the president, who doesn't want anyone to know about anything to do with the Epstein files. Why? And people will like come up and it's like, oh, whoa, there's a picture of Bill Clinton there. Bill Clinton in the pool with Epstein. What about that? What about it? Why aren't you talking about that? Motherfucker. We don't stutter when we say anyone that's involved with Jeffrey Epstein is to be investigated, and if they did something wrong, burn them to the ground. It doesn't matter what party they are in. That includes Bill Clinton. That includes any name in there. Any name that's in the Epstein files should be investigated. But you know what? Despite the fact that Bill Clinton's picture was there, Bill Clinton wants the whole Epstein file released. Well, geez, that's something a guilty man would be saying. You know, not like the innocence of Donald Trump, who's trying everything he can to obfuscate and hide. When they were compelled to release the Epstein files, down to the last hour that they were supposed to release them, they released only piecemeal and heavily redacted, in violation of the actual law that Donald Trump himself wrote to be transparent, to release the Epstein files. He broke his own law. Until you realize that all you really needed to do is get a copy of those redacted files digitized and have your own little Adobe, and you can remove the redactions. Anyone. Is everybody on the anyone that Epstein ever mentions, are they, child molesting rapists? Most likely not. Most likely they're just spoken about of an innocent nature. But that doesn't mean you don't investigate. Many now women who were children then, or young teenage girls then, were abused. You know what? Molested and abused, those are sugar-coated terms. Raped. Young girls were raped. They were trafficked to an island to be raped. They followed around Epstein, handed off to Epstein's friends to be raped. There are many horrific stories that are coming out in the Epstein files. And Donald Trump's name seems to come up again and again and again and again. At what point does politics overrule a young girl being raped? At what point in your partisan, tribal aspect of your personality, of your ideology, that you go, you know what? Maybe Donald Trump took part in raping young girls. But hey, that's a trade-off for him being president now. Look all the good he's done now. Is owning the libs worth a young girl crying in pain, in humiliation, in anguish? Whether Trump is involved or not. Because one of the major tropes of our politics is that sometimes the cover-up is worse than the crime. If you can say without a shadow of a doubt, or you believe without a shadow of a doubt that Donald Trump has done nothing untoward to these young girls, some of whom, according to these documentation, he was around for hours, that he knew them. But if you're going to believe that he did nothing to these young girls, fine. Then the crime is him burying it and covering it up, trying to change the story, trying to change your direction and perceptions, trying to force his will of his government to drag this down, to not release anything. Sometimes the cover-up is the crime. And it comes down to a basic question. One of these non-nuanced questions, since this presidential administration under Trump likes to, take things as a kind of a childlike perception. Let's do a little childlike, conclusions of this. Dragging your feet in the Epstein files, not releasing the names of those in those files, not investigating those names, is protecting pedophiles. You are protecting the child rapists. If you don't even want to investigate a name and exonerate them, you're just burying it for their protection. Because, one of the excuses I heard recently, I don't know if it's true or not, but one of the Donald Trump excuses of not releasing the Epstein file totally, that it would damage too many Democrats. Burn it to the ground. Burn the Democrats to the ground. We did not stutter. There should be no ideological question or argument in terms of child rape. People like Megyn Kelly shouldn't be mincing the words of, oh, well, it's not really pedophilia because it's not underage. I mean, it was only 15 years old. I mean, that's a bit different. Fuck you. What's wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you? It could be 5. It could be 15. It could be 25, 35, 45. A woman is crying in anguish and in pain because she's being raped. Do we have to really hash out how bad that is as an act? And make the many subtle levels of maybe it's a little bit better that she was raped at 25 as opposed to being raped at 5? For the sake of your politics, are you ready to make that argument? And apparently, there is political consequence for those who stand up to Trump in wanting to release these files when they're part of his party, when it's actually part of his, MAGA inner circle in terms of his defenders. When Marjorie Taylor Greene, again, spoke out for the Epstein victims and wanted releasing the files. And he turned on her because of it. She's resigning from Congress in a matter of days now. Her political career as in this incarnation is over. Excuse me. Because she stood up to Donald Trump. She, in her stance, whether noble or depraved, in her stance, for whatever motivations, to stand with the victims and to release the files, she is a pariah to the MAGA community now. She's a traitor. Lauren Boebert, the other MAGA daughter of Donald Trump, is also now persona non grata. For she too wanted the release of the Epstein files. And as to her punishment is a bit more grand. because her punishment is actually part and parcel with Donald Trump's first veto of his administration, his current second administration. And what horrible thing that he had to stop? He had to stop a bill that would secure clean and affordable drinking water to Colorado. Yes. Something that was not controversial, was not political, something that was passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate, one of the few bills Laura Boebert pushed for and got successfully passed, and passed massively, unanimously, gets to the president's desk, and the best president vetoes it. Clean water, removing the salts, removing the harsh metals, removing radiations, removing the stuff that is harmful in drinking water that this bill would provide. He vetoed it. And why? Because his MAGA daughter betrayed him by standing up and wanting the release of the Epstein files. Because protecting child rapists is more important than people in Colorado getting drinking water. Which is not to say that that's the first act that he has done against Boebert and or Colorado, because in the recent devastation of their forest fire, Trump denied Colorado disaster relief funding. Trump moved his vaulted Space Force away from Colorado, so they don't get the benefit of the monies involved in putting that agency there. So he's going to callously, without consequence, without responsibility, like someone who was a child would do, he's going to make people in Colorado suffer. Now, they're going to have drinking water, yeah, but it'll be 3 times as expensive than it would be otherwise. Oh, this is all the same day that the Obama subsidies is also going to lapse. So anyone who has insurance through Obamacare, their already price hiked rates is going to get higher. Like I said, there's so much to say. It is embarrassing. I've said this before in various videos. But the one thing I in kind of a byproduct, backhanded way, I actually credit Donald Trump with was shattering the illusion of political idealism. When you think about it, no other president has done what he has done. So flagrantly, nakedly, defied the rule of law, defied the courts, defy various protections and safeguards to keep corruption from the White House. Because as someone that I suspect has never been told no in any significant manner when he grew up, or when he became physically older, not mentally or emotionally, he does what he wants. He does what he wants, and no one stops him. You would think they would stop him. It would stop You would think it would stop any other president. Despite all his money, all his influence, he would still be able to be compelled to abide within the confines of the rule of law within his office. But he doesn't. And no one stops him. Could it be just because of partisan politics? Maybe. We have seen, sadly, the veil of illusion of people's judgment, their ideals, when it comes to backing your tribe in politics. All your ideologies, all your personal ideals, they go by the wayside in order to defend your president. That's one of the veil liftings that the Trump administration and Donald Trump himself has done. And that's kind of a very sad, very depressing, but very sad and depressing what would you call it? Revealing that perhaps all our ideals is just lip service. All the things that we say are just ironclad, set in stone rules are as flimsy as paper. Written in the Constitution. Unless it's the Second Amendment, we don't care. We'll get rid of birthright citizenship. People's principles. People who are known in their long political careers for their principles. That you may or may not agree with their politics, but you at least agree that they believe whatever they believe in is at least in the benefit of the United States of America, of at the very least their constituents. That even those principles are negotiable. And perhaps for the sake of the politics of the day, can be buried or ignored until they're out of politics or until they're out of their particular administration, and then they go, oh, well, since I'm out of the politics, then I may as well write a book and say how much I hated this whole thing. Be bestseller. Which is one of those things, like whenever you hear somebody who was like from the Trump administration who got fired or who resigned or quit or just retired or whatever, all of a sudden they have this tell-all book that people will all read and flock to. It's great that you brought out this shit now. Where were you then? So I never read any of these books. I never buy any of these books. Because if all that was happening then, you didn't like it then, but you said shit, then you're no better. You made that compromise. Now, I always said that compromise is the genius of the American system. That America, as a country, was built on compromise. But there's good compromise and there's bad compromise. Compromising for the sake of progressing forward, that's good. For the sake of the 13 colonies to be united in a Declaration of Independence, they had to compromise away the little clause about slavery. As horrific as that was, and that had to be resolved in a civil war some 90 years later. Nonetheless, if they hadn't done that, those 13 colonies would not have signed off on the Declaration of Independence, and therefore a number of those colonies who had majority populations who were still loyal to England might have stayed Tory. It might have not signed off. It might have given themselves foothold for England to come through unopposed to strike at those rebellious colonies, and we would not have the United States. But when it comes to compromising your own principles for the sake of some sort of benefit you get riding the coattails of someone like Donald Trump, then he never really had principles. If you had the principles of not getting involved in another foreign war, that you didn't want us to be, intervening in other countries and other conflicts. You want to keep onto your own soil, then you wouldn't be supportive of us having these little flights of fancy in Venezuela or Nigeria or Iran or anywhere else. If you were against drug trafficking and you somehow deluded yourself to think about blowing up these boats was about drug trafficking, but then you don't have a problem with Donald Trump pardoning the ex-president of Honduras? Because he was someone who trafficked millions of drugs into our country? You're fine with that? But you're fine with him pardoning that? And you're fine with him blowing up boats because they might be bringing drugs in? You don't have principles about drugs. You're fine with him going after people of Somali descent in Minnesota because they might have been involved in some fraud scheme, while he pardons people who've done millions upon millions of dollars in fraud against the United States? You don't have principles about that. It's all about politics. Whether it's the color of someone's skin, whether you're getting whatever drugs you are in a back alley in a brown paper bag, or if it's a cry of a young girl being raped. It seems that everything's negotiable so long as your party wins. Isn't that sad? Should be sad. But this day and age, it's not surprising. It's not shocking. As we go from backwards to forwards, like I said, what was said about Reiner by Donald Trump upon his death, of his murder, of him and his wife being murdered by his son? What Donald Trump said about that? It's horrible, despicable, evil, but not surprising. It's only surprising about those who still go to bat for this man, regardless of everything he said or he has done. Be it what he said about Rob Reiner, what he potentially have done in the Epstein files, what he is doing to ships in Venezuelan waters, what he did in Nigeria, what he's doing on the streets of his own cities of these United States with the National Guard and ICE. What he's doing in Colorado depriving people of Colorado from clean drinking water because one of their representatives wanted to release the files concerning child rape. That is surprising of how many people want to go to bat for this man. The ranter rants because the Earth's rant is always rising. See you next time.